Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining us this morning or afternoon on this special edition of Technology in Practice. Today, we're going to do a little business continuity live Q&A or meetup, and I'll be your host, but we've got some special guests on a panel today, and we're going to take questions live. So before I begin here, quick introduction, background on kind of tips and what it is. I've been at Citrix almost 16 years now, and I've been in our consulting team for 15 years, and I recently transitioned to our customer success team. But one of the questions I've been asked most of my career is, where can I find the latest best practices? Or, where can I stay up to date on everything that's happening in the Citrix world? So about 2 or 3 years ago, we started this tips series, and it's really the primary goal is to address just that. Let's take an hour or so out of each month, and let's share some of the latest best practices with the community. We always want to make sure the content is technical, and our top architects, like the folks we have on today, are the ones that are sharing the lessons learned from the field. Anyway, hopefully this isn't your first tips webinar, and if you've already subscribed to the series, that's great. If not, you can subscribe in the links on the screen there. And you can watch all of our past webinars from the last 2 or 3 years. There's about 30 in total now on using the link there, or you can go right to YouTube. If you just search kind of Citrix plus technology in practice, you'll find them all pop up there. Anyway, onto the agenda here. As I mentioned, we're going to do some quick, we have some guests on the panel today, and we're going to do some quick introductions, and then we'll just dive right into the Q&A. And anything and everything's on the table, right? So if you have a technical question about, standing up remote PC, or if you have a non-technical question or a strategy question about, business continuity planning, anything goes today. We just wanted to keep it open, and we'll take any questions as we go. And if we don't have enough time to answer all your questions that we get, I'll be writing a little follow-up article and post it on Citrix community within the week here. And we'll try to get all your questions answered that way. All right, so introducing our panel. First up, Sarah Steinhoff. Sarah, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure, thanks, Nick. I'm Sarah Steinhoff. I'm the lead architect consulting with Citrix for almost 13 years now, on virtual apps and desktop solutions.
Awesome, thanks, Sarah. Ryan?
Yeah, thanks, Nick. Ryan McClure. Similar to Nick and Sarah, I was with our consulting team for quite a while there, about 8 years before joining our customer success management team about a year ago. So I am a lead architect with that team, and I also manage our customer success engineering team globally.
Awesome, thanks, Ryan. Mr. Scott Lane.
Hey, thanks, Nick. Yeah, I think Nick and I must have started about the same time. I've been at Citrix for almost 16 years as well. I've always been pretty much in the sales engineering organization, and you guys may have seen me doing a lot of product demos. I do a lot of those, but have a lot of specialty around HDX delivery, and as such, find this topic very interesting. Having a lot of good discussions right now. Currently, I'm a distinguished sales engineer and talk to a lot of the biggest customers across the U.S. So hopefully you guys find this to be a really good use of your time, and we can get some information that you need out to you.
Awesome. Thanks, Scott. And last but not least, Mr. Daniel Feller, who probably doesn't need any introduction, but we'll give you your 30 seconds anyway, Dan.
Yeah, I must be the old timer here. I'm at my 20th year at Citrix now, spending about the first 5 or 10 in consulting. Even before that, I was a Citrix admin doing WinTrim and MetaFrame at one of the sites. I'm now in tech marketing, but please don't let the marketing title scare you. We're not the type of marketing that creates crazy numbers of how great something is. What we try to do is demonstrate and educate the greater community on what's possible, how things work, just to try to make sure that everyone understands how these technologies fit together and how you can use them in your environment.
Perfect. Thanks, Dan. All right, and thanks to all the panelists for those quick intros, but let's dive in since we're 5 minutes in and we want to get as many questions here as we can answered. One of the things we did differently for this tips was we actually asked for a few pre-submitted questions. So when you did register, you had the last field there in the form was was a field designated for a question if you wanted to pre-submit one. And we did get a handful of those, and we have some coming in from the audience right now live. But we'll start with one of the first ones we received, and that's, how is Citrix preparing its own cloud services for customer BCP needs? Ryan, do you want to maybe take that one? I know you presented on that topic actually at Synergy and Summit pretty recently.
Yeah, sure. I can take that one. So there are a couple of things we've been really focused on. So the first one is actually making sure that we use our own technologies so that the services can still be managed effectively, even if the location of the workforce is fluid through current conditions. The second one is that we've really tried to tighten the collaboration between our customer success org and our cloud operations team so that we can gain as much proactive visibility into what customers are planning to do over the course of the next couple of weeks and months so that we can, anticipate those needs and respond accordingly to the best of our abilities. And then last but perhaps not least is that we've really increased our change rigor to focus on changes specifically related to availability, scale, performance, or compliance. So, we're obviously trying to balance that with the type of innovation that folks expect from, a company like Citrix. But first and foremost are those kind of key pillars around availability, scale, performance, and compliance to make sure that, as customers are relying on these services to continue to operate their business more than ever, we're doing our part to make sure that they're there to meet that need.
Perfect. Thanks, Ryan. The next question we got here is from a customer, it looks like. What are some of the best practices for deploying the VDA through SCCM? So I know we've been doing quite a bit of this in some of our remote PC deployments in particular. Sarah, do you want to maybe chime in, since I know you've been close to a couple of those deployments in the East?
Sure. I think the key lesson we've learned here is that you greatly increase your odds of success if you set prereqs, so the .NET, C++, the actual VDA install. We have seen with folks that tend to have more Windows 10 deployments, they tend to have those requirements already. But with Windows reboots to first deploy that software, reboot a couple times, then get to the full VDA. And then if we keep that cycle going, we can have higher chances of success than deploying through SCCM.
Perfect. Thanks, Sarah. And I know your audio is cutting in a little bit, I think, for some folks there, but I think one of the main lessons Sarah was highlighting there was separating the prereqs out first into its own little SCCM package, and then pause, deal with reboots, and then a secondary package for the actual VDA. I know we've had more success in that because people have tried to do it all in one package, and it's definitely given us some trouble. All right, the next question here. This one's pretty loaded. What's the percentage of remote work in society in 2020? So let me take a crack at that one, and anybody else feel free to chime in here. So obviously things are changing pretty rapidly, right? As we're seeing entire workforces or organizations sending all employees home to work remotely right now. But I think if we back up a few months, or we look at 2019, I know some of the data there. It's kind of surprising. Only 5% is the number I think that most folks quote when I was looking at like the latest Quartz or Gallup polls. It was only about 5% are working remotely full time. So an important note there is full time, because a lot of the other studies will say that like 40 or I think 43% of the workforce works remotely in some fashion now. So that basically means like 1 day a week somebody works from home. So quite a big difference there between the 5% and 43%. But I think what this person was asking about was probably the 5% number. So, I mean, even though it feels like 80 or 100% of the world's working from home right now, most of the experts predict that 5% number settling in around 25%. I saw another study that said it might be as high as 33% in the next like 5 to 10 years. So, I obviously I work for Citrix. I'm biased. I think it could be even higher, and I think this is the new norm. But if you think about it, that's an enormous jump from 5% today, full-time remote workers, to maybe a quarter or a third of the workforce being true work from home employees in less than a decade. So that's like really crazy growth. Anyways, that's my 2 cents on that one.
Hey,
All
Nick,
right.
I have
Yeah.
a thought on that, if you don't mind. I mean,
Go for it.
I work at home. I worked at home for the last 16 plus years, and of course, Citrix technology has always enabled me to be able to do that. But I think what's making it become more the norm is we're starting to see examples of it more and more every day. And I actually caught something day before yesterday. Well, maybe it was yesterday. No, it was day before yesterday. Sorry. Sitting here in my home office, working through Workspace, and off to the side, I have one of the cable news shows on. And I'm noticing that all the cable news shows, they're even working remotely right now, coming in through their webcams remotely over public internets, coming in, literally broadcasting, some of them from their living room. So the technology has come so far. And I was taken away by one of the news anchors actually saying on one of the cable TV news shows, and this is a direct quote, "We're watching the face of labor and how we work fundamentally change." And I think what's so important about this discussion right now, I know we haven't gotten too technical yet, but every one of us who are technologists, we have to not only be prepared for business continuity, but we have to be prepared to adopt the way that people want to work now and open up so many new opportunities for our lines of business.
Perfect. Yep, thanks for that, Scott. All right, next question here says, I manage a few computing labs in our school districts. The teachers will hold remote computing classes for the students. A bunch of students come in every 50 minutes, then another class, and then another. Is there an easy way to do this remotely? Dan, do you want to maybe take a stab at that one?
Yeah, it's kind of funny. This is kind of what's happening at even my kids' school too, since they're all at home now for God knows how long. But you know, we talk a lot about PC of user get to their office machine, being remote, and that's the whole that's a one-to-one relationship. So that doesn't really work in a lab environment because those machines in a lab are shared. Student walks in, sit down on an available machine, and when they're done, they leave, and you have 20 or 30 machines in there. So what we can actually end up doing is it's essentially you're just doing a pooled desktop, except it's not virtual. So it's kind of a cross between what we traditionally think of VDI and remote PC. We always think of remote PC as this remote access to a physical, and VDI is access to a virtual machine. So what we're doing is there's random access to physical machines, and within virtual apps and desktops, it's just doing a pooled machine catalog with no image management, no power management, none of those features that we typically do in VDI. Now, some of the caveats with that is that you basically want to make sure the shutdown command is hidden so that students don't shut these machines down. There are awake and LAN capabilities, but it's just easier removing shutdown. And you also really need to look at idle timers and disconnect timers too, because a lot of people are just going to disconnect, and you need those machines to be freed up. So you need to look at what's the class schedules look like, set your session timers, idle timers, and disconnected timers so you can handle the constant change of students coming in and out throughout the day.
Perfect. Thanks, Dan. All right. Next question here. Why would you recommend either a remote PC or virtual apps and desktop solution for this workforce relocation over VPN? Oh, that's a good one. I know some companies have leveraged VPN plus RDP to their existing desktops. Seems like it's quick and simple. Why not do this instead? Scott, I know that's something actually I think you covered in one of your workforce continuity webinars. Do you want to address that one?
Oh yeah, that's really a hot topic right now, Nick. I'm just going to start this off by saying that one of our colleagues, I won't call out who his beloved bride works for, but he was sitting at the table working. Of course, he's a Citrix, so he's working through Citrix, and she's sitting next to him trying to work for her company through a traditional VPN. He's in and working productively in a matter of seconds. and she is struggling beyond belief to do things like get the VPN client downloaded onto her laptop. Even though it was a corporate issued laptop, it was out of date. There were multiple prompts for authentication. Then once she gets into the laptop, she can't find what she's looking for because she's used to just having it all on the desktop at work. And if she did try to RDP back to her desktop, she has no idea what her desktop is. So the big thing there, it's just not as user-friendly. I think we can also all argue that VPNs, especially when you go to scale broadly, you really have to think about security policies and exactly what are you going to open to that endpoint and exactly what are you going to allow to connect. And that can get complex, and we don't want to get sloppy in times like this. Converse that with an HDX delivery, and I can deliver out very quickly either an internal virtualization resource, a cloud-hosted virtual resource, or a remote PC with some very easy security controls that will allow it to be connected to over just about anything. I refer to it as Aunt Millie's old PC, for example. So I can lock down the clipboard, the client drive mapping, watermark the session, turn off printing, and with our new app protection policy, I can put my head on the pillow tonight and not worry about if that old PC that Aunt Millie has, if it has malware that's going to have screen scrapers and keyloggers. That's all that can be prevented as well. So we can avoid the security compromises. We can give them a use case they're familiar with, something that feels good to them, that's easy to set up. If they can't get Workspace app on their device, they can just go to a URL and access everything through a browser. And I will tell you that the other thing is you have to think about the applications. If I take my work laptop home and I just do a VPN, an IPsec VPN back to the mothership, chances are I've still got some applications on there that are old and fat and chatty, and they're going to be very, very slow over that VPN tunnel. And some of the stuff that I may do might actually utilize a lot of your network capabilities at the head end and bottleneck you there. The point is, if I use virtualization resources, I can have either that remote PC or those virtual resources right next to the application tier. We've been talking about that for 15 years. It very much applies today.
Awesome, thanks, Scott. There's about 3 or 4 questions now about kind of licensing. So let me try to tackle all these in one. So one of the questions about, like, I just found out about the BCP program. What are the BCP licensing options? Are there options for cloud? So yeah, let me try to tackle all these. So the one thing that we can, that I've been pointing a lot of customers and partners to is David Henshall's kind of response emails, and he's posted 2 or 3 of them now. So if you hit Citrix blogs, you can find them there. But toward the bottom of one of the first articles that he posted, he laid out 3 different options or things we're doing right now for customers related to BCP. So the first is the BC Assurance Program, and that's essentially a CVAD or virtual apps and desktops offering. The second one is Citrix Managed Desktops. So that's our kind of turnkey DAS solution running on Azure. And then the third one is kind of a newer one. It's called Citrix Workspace Essentials, and that's targeted really more at the small and medium business customers out there. So those are the 3. If you want details on exactly what we're providing, like as part of the assurance program, we're getting a lot of questions about that. Just reach out to your local Citrix sales rep, and you can learn more about the specifics. And if you don't know who your local Citrix sales rep is, you can always call 1-800 for Citrix, or you can email any of us, even myself, and I'm happy to point you in the right direction. Let's take one of the next one here. Where are the Citrix Cloud services hosted on? Is it AWS or Azure platform? Brian, that's similar to kind of the first question you took. Do you want to try to answer that one the best you can?
Yeah, sure. I'll take that one. So You've probably seen us up on stage at Synergy and things like that, talking about how tightly integrated we are with Microsoft on the Azure front, but it wouldn't be accurate to say that our Citrix Cloud services exclusively or entirely run just based on Azure services. We do make use of a little bit of a hybrid multi-cloud blend. So there are some of the other major public cloud providers in there as well for some of the sub-services. But Azure is a big piece of it, and then, some of the other ones are in there as well.
Yeah, and another thing I can say publicly too on that is we just added some additional points of presence on, around the internet, and we actually published those in a public CTX article. And we just updated that this weekend. So we added 4 additional AWS POPs. And so I was looking at the list. It brings us to around, I want to say, 20 total globally POPs. And it's about half and half, Azure and AWS. I want to say it's maybe 12, Azure now and 7 or 8 AWS. And I think now with the additional AWS POPs this weekend, I think now we're in every single geographic area, which is cool. And that's public, so if you want to search for that, that's out there.
Nick, I want to throw something in there if you don't mind. A lot of the customers that sales engineers like I are talking to, one of the things that we're talking to customers about is how do I know I have enough capacity to do all of this? And that's one of the beauties of leveraging cloud services like Citrix Cloud, because once you buy the subscription to utilize in that manner, we take care of the capacity. We take care of the routing to the best point of presence and so on and so forth. So that takes a lot of the workload and I would hate to say guesswork, but sometimes it ends up being guesswork off of you as the customer in the design to help you get things going quicker.
Perfect. Thanks for that, Scott. All right. Next question from Fred here. Now that end users are remote, getting a lot of issues raised due to slowness, disconnects from the user's home to corporate VDI or remote PC. Any recommendations on supporting this? Scott, you want to take that one, or Dan? Yeah, Dan, go ahead.
I'll start with that one. I think a lot of people are going to have some feedback on this one. The first thing I would take a look at and make sure you set are Citrix policies. Out of the default, I believe that, if you just use virtual apps and desktops out with the default configuration, it's really set for this very high quality experience. When you're remote, you probably don't need all those capabilities. You probably don't need your drive mappings and your printer mappings and a bunch of other capabilities in there. So that's probably one of the first things you want to do is just start reducing the functionality that a user can do within that session, and that will help start lowering the overall bandwidth requirements, and hopefully make the responsiveness, just make the whole session, a little bit better for the user who's being remote.
Perfect. Thanks, Dan. And Scott, the reason I thought of you is because I think you mentioned just this last week, you kind of have like a personal SD-WAN solution. Can you kind of speak to how you deal with that or what creative solutions you came up with?
Well, first of all, I will echo what Dan just said, but yes, I live it every day. I choose to live where I do, but I have absolutely no wired internet whatsoever. I live at the end of LTE, and I have done it for almost 4 years. One of the things that I do, I actually have an SD-WAN 210 LTE appliance that I have here in my home office, and I bond 3 cellular connections together. And if you're not familiar with that solution, it's a symmetric solution. We are looking more at leveraging a kind of a work-at-home appliance option with this, kind of similar to my model. The one I have is a built-in LTE radio, and I plug in a couple other LTE connections, and I basically, that creates a bonded secure tunnel, if you will, back to the head end. And I used to have issues where I'd be working along, the internet would get saturated on one connection, and I would slow down. We all know what it's like, right? The cursor comes to a stop. You can't type anymore. Web pages aren't loading. But what happens now is I don't experience that at all because this is automatically in the background switching me from one line to the next line to the next line, whichever one's most responsive. Now, I will throw out one other option. I want you to certainly consider SD-WAN if you've got a lot of work-at-home people, because that is becoming more and more of a solution case for us. But there is a Citrix Ready solution out there, and I use it as well. Look it up under Citrix Ready. It's a company called Speedify. And if I don't have my SD-WAN set up, I've got a software solution where I can bond an Ethernet and maybe a USB tethered cell phone and a Wi-Fi connection. And again, work all day without a drop.
Awesome. Thanks, Scott. Yeah, we're starting to see some creative solutions, I think, as more and more folks are working from home.
Absolutely. Well, and I've got one of the more challenging situations. I don't want to scare anybody here because I would dare say, probably somebody will correct me here, Nick, but I would dare say I've probably got one of the most challenging work from home solutions just because of where I choose to live.
Yeah, and I'm also a remote worker, Scott, right? I mean, been doing that, and traveling, working from anywhere for, 16 years now, and I'm definitely at the opposite end of the spectrum. Like, I have fiber to my door, right? Now that everyone's, I think, working from home,
jealous.
We're throttling Netflix. I mean, I'm still fine because I've dedicated,
Yeah, I guess I'm probably in the middle of you two. It's the connection's not bad, but of course, every so often you lose the connection because a car hits a telephone down the street. But then everything's out. But yeah, I rarely run into disconnected sessions, and I'm in VDI all day, every day.
All right. Next question here. What will be the next technology challenges that will come out of COVID-19 response? We've seen the impact of video conferencing on public networks. Is there like a NetScaler opportunity? So I think Todd was asking about that. Ryan, do you want to take a stab at that one?
Yeah, I can lead into that. And I think the first point made right in the question is a good example. So I think we're seeing that network bandwidth is becoming more and more at a premium than it has been in the past. I think I saw a stat somewhere that in general, metropolitan areas are seeing somewhere between a 20 and 40% increase in network traffic over the course of the last couple of weeks as opposed to steady state. So, that's definitely one of the trends that we're seeing is, that there are only two ways that can go, right? Make more bandwidth available or make the traffic consuming the bandwidth more efficient. So, I think that that's definitely one. Another that's very much on my mind right now is, it's more important than ever for, our customers, for Citrix as an organization, really for the technology community as a whole to keep themselves honest about striking a balance between security and urgency and performing the right degree of due diligence through all of this. There are imminent needs to address business challenges, and oftentimes it requires perhaps making an exception that sometimes, during business as usual, we wouldn't really want to make or consider making. And I think it's becoming more and more important than ever to really do the diligence to validate that making that exception unlocks more opportunity than risk it generates. So, that's definitely something that I think we're seeing customers grapple with on a minute-by-minute, day by day, hour by hour basis, trying to find the right way to make those decisions. And bad actors are well aware of the current circumstances as well, that people are working in ways that they're not used to, that they're working from places that they don't commonly work, and the opportunity that potentially introduces for a bad actor. So something else that I think will be a critical trend over the course of the coming weeks and months. Another that I think the customers that are thinking about this the best are doing well is that they're not thinking about these business continuity solutions that they're deploying as, just business continuity solutions, but also they're looking long-term at, okay, maybe this ability to make users more productive and let them work from everywhere and give them some additional flexibility was number 25 on their list of to-dos. And now it's number 1 because it's the only way that they can keep business moving forward. But how do they turn that into something sustainable long-term and make it a competitive differentiator around, talent retention or attracting new employees or something along those lines? So, That's not necessarily a technology problem, but I think is something that, we can properly adopt technologies now to set ourselves up for the future. And then the last one, I think Scott used an example earlier about someone's significant other and the way that they were working as compared to, the Citrix solution sitting right next to it. I'm seeing folks having to teach people to do simple things like use the find people or the search feature in Skype, right? Things that we assume as technologists are, kind of table stakes knowledge. But at the end of the day, I think getting back to user-centric thinking and making sure that we deploy solutions that actually solve the end user's problem, not our perception of what that problem is, that'll be key to doing this right long term as well.
Perfect. Thanks, Ryan. All right, next question here. It looks like a follow-up from one of our customers in Canada. I'll take it really quickly. Do you have POPs in Canada? So yeah, Fardeen, if you look at that article, if you Google Citrix Gateway Service new points of presence, you'll see those 19 or 20 or so POPs that I was talking about. And one of the 4 AWS POPs that we added this weekend is in Canada. So that is awesome. All right, next one here. Sorry, I joined a little late. Was NetScaler RDP proxy covered? And how do we differentiate ICA proxy? Scott, do you want to maybe take a stab at that one?
Yeah, I will. I will tell you that it's been quite a while since I've played around with that. It does exist, and absolutely you can use NetScaler or ADC to be a gateway into an RDP host or a series of RDP hosts. I will tell you that all of the policies to publish the desktops and so on and so forth are all done through the gateway itself and in session policies in the gateway. So you have to do quite a bit of configuration at a policy level to set it up. Additionally, what I worry about if somebody tries to use that as a solution is that you don't have some of the things that, and actually I don't know if we've covered this yet with Remote PC, but you don't have the Wake on LAN technologies that are built into some of the Remote PC offerings to actually wake up a host if it goes offline. And then the other thing is, at the end of the day, it's RDP. And I'm not here to bash on it by any means, but the performance is simply not going to be as good as HDX. Now, I'll tell you what I've seen some customers do. And while I'd rather see a customer use a true one-to-one HDX, give me apps, desktops, remote PCs over HDX through an ADC gateway, if you cannot get to that point, I have seen some customers in a bit of an emergency just publish the RDP client on an app and desktop, or for those that you aren't keeping up with the name changes, a XenApp server, and let the user know what their PC host name is, and just let them come in that way. I've seen that done many times over the years, and I think it's more elegant than going through the RDP proxy on an ADC gateway. Although I will say, it's there. I think it was meant more for admins, to be honest with you.
Perfect. Thanks, Scott. The next question is going to be a fun one. I heard you soon no longer support setting up classic on-prem Citrix components manually within a cloud environment. Is that true? And if so, what are the reasons? Ryan, I designate you as the lucky person to take a stab at that, and I can chime in too if you want.
Yeah, sure. So, that is accurate as of the 2003 release. It's really focused more on the VDA piece of things than it is on the infrastructure. But really what we're seeing is that in general, when customers are interested in deploying workloads in a public cloud, it's part of a greater cloud-first sort of mentality. So it often maps better to consuming our app and desktop service as opposed to deploying their own sort of conventional on-prem infrastructure in that public cloud right alongside the VDAs. The other element of it is really rate of change, right? These public clouds and the functionality that they expose, even something as simple as like the instances available in terms of like CPU and memory under the hood, it's super dynamic. So we have a little bit more flexibility and agility in our public cloud services. So like the app and desktop service, for example, to keep up with that rate of change than we do with our on-prem product releases. So things like that are really kind of the primary reasons for us doing it. It's not hard enforced in the 2003 version other than a supportability statement, but it is something that we're considering more rigorous enforcement in down the road.
Yeah, and I'll
hopefully
also
that
add,
helps answer it.
It does, Ryan, yeah. And I'll also add that obviously this is a tough decision, right? But I think, and you talked about the rate of change. And one thing I'll say there is like, we want to make sure that we, keep up, with that rate of change and how fast things are moving in the cloud. There's things like that, the customers are really demanding, things like, ultra SSDs or, availability groups in Azure. And we want to be able to support those things, day one, day zero, or a lot quicker than we have been. So, tough choice, but I think it's the right choice ultimately to be a cloud-first company. All right, next question up here. Can you please provide an overview of NetScaler always on VPN? Any cases where this might be advantageous compared with, traditional stuff? Let's see.
Yeah, I can try to take that one. So this whole always on VPN, if you think about, if you have a corporate-owned device that's like domain joined and the user takes that with them, think of a laptop. One of the challenges you have when the person's not physically in the office, they don't actually have a connection to the main controller until that VPN starts up. So let's say you have password change policies. I know we all have these things. What happens when you're not connected to the VPN, but yet the password change policy hits? In order to change your password, you have to be connected to the domain. So does that mean you have to then go into the office just to get to the network to change your password? Well, that's what one of the whole always on VPN things is trying to solve, is that when the machine boots up, the VPN automatically starts and makes this VPN connection to the infrastructure with a machine identity. And that just gives that VPN connection just enough rights to be able to do certain things like that, get GPOs from the domain. And then when the user physically logs into the device, the VPN then switches from a machine-based VPN over to a user-based VPN where more applicable policies are used, that's appropriate for the particular user, the particular instance. So that's kind of what the always-on VPN is really looking to try to solve and how it works. I don't know if anyone else has anything to add on top of that.
No, that's solid. Thanks, Dan. We have actually a couple questions now about kind of voice / EDT, UDP. Someone was actually putting the ports in there and saying, is this, what are these UDP ports? So yeah, that is EDT, which is the default now, right? Especially in that 1912 LTSR that just shipped a couple months ago. So one of the questions here is, is adaptive transport or EDT best for voice and video quality? Scott, do you want to maybe take a stab at that one?
Yeah, I'll tell you, voice and video quality there's a lot of decisions that have to be made there. So I guess what you come down to is what is the source of the voice and video quality, or voice and video that you're worried about the quality of. If you're doing something unified comms like Skype or Teams or Jabber or Avaya 1X or one of those, I am always going to recommend to you that you look at optimization. And we have these optimization packs that either we've released or we've worked with Microsoft on, or Cisco or Avaya released on their own, right? And they make them available, and basically what it does is it offloads all of that voice video traffic to the endpoint. So only the UI of the service shows up in the HDX delivery. Now, I'm not going to live in a fantasy world and sit here and tell you that you can run absolutely everything every day optimized. So there are a couple of things here that I will throw out there. First of all, for voice and video, I always suggest setting the HDX policy to do voice and video to where use UDP were available. Now, that's a default HDX policy now, but I on purposely set it on, okay? Additionally, if you're going to use UDP audio, this is for when you fall back and you're not optimized, or somebody opens a web page and it's got audio on it, or something like that. I also want to make sure that the NetScaler Gateway, the ADC, has the DTLS policy checked and enabled. That's basically going to tunnel that UDP over TLS. And then the other thing is, if you're doing a lot of bidirectional audio, basically, like we're talking right now over voice over IP, basically. If you're doing a lot of that kind of stuff, then you also want to check your audio quality and choose the optimized for speech. Sometimes I will also suggest that if you're in a bandwidth situation where people are working from home and maybe things aren't the richest in bandwidth, or we're getting crunched with the network like we've been talking about, there are some ways to disable the webcam within there too. Although I will say that I think webcams are becoming very much in vogue right now with everybody working from home. But I think that kind of answers the question. I didn't really worry too much. I don't worry as much about the actual interactive choice that I make, but I will tell you the later versions of the protocol do include the ability to do UDP audio to those ports you speak of. And if you can enable that UDP and enable the DTLS on the NetScaler to go all the way out, you will notice a very good experience, even if you don't have to, even if you can't optimize. I will call it like a cell phone quality experience. I took a stab at it, Nick. I hope that's good.
Nope, I like it. I like it. Thanks, Scott. All right, 2 questions here on CMD. So again, that's our Citrix Managed Desktops, one of those 3 business continuity, kind of product offerings I covered earlier. So one of them is asking, is CMD the fastest route to getting users started working from home? And another question was, does CMD, support Citrix policies? I read that's maybe not the case. Can you clarify? Sarah, do you want to maybe take a stab at that one?
Sure. We'll see if hopefully audio is a little bit better now. So for managed desktops, yes, it is the simplest solution that we have in that it is a fully baked Citrix Cloud service, right? So all the control components, the login, kind of everything is provided as a service, including optionally the desktop to be hosted in Citrix's own Azure subscription and Azure AD domain. So you can truly get away with that desktop that's hosted in someone else's domain. Yes, it may be the fastest thing to stand up. I think the challenge we're seeing is that a lot of customers can't get away with that fully managed desktop. From that desktop, users need to be able to access on-prem file servers or applications, and the more that you need to customize within that desktop, joining it to your own custom domain or joining it into your Azure subscription, the longer, of course, you're going to take to get something that's fully functional. So we are seeing a lot of interest in managed desktops. It is one of those more turnkey solutions, but I think the reality that we see in a lot of customers is that what they really need doesn't fit 100% into that turnkey. So they're having to, put more work into developing a desktop that really is usable for their users, that takes time to set up VNet peering or anything else to truly access those users' applications. Because it is one of our newer services, it also is still a little bit limited in terms of functionality. So policies is one of those things that's not available yet. If the desktop is joined to a customer's AD, then obviously you still have options to do GPO management and layer in some additional controls that way. But then again, you're breaking away from this fully managed and remotely hosted environment and pulling that desktop more into your environment, which again, then now you're taking on more of that ownership and operational responsibility to maintain that machine, and it's becoming less of a service and more of something that you're owning and operating. So trade-off there between functionality and time effort from what I'm seeing.
Perfect. Thanks, Sarah. Yeah, and audio does sound much more clear now. Thank you. All right, next question here. Productivity is key. What are the things you use to get by in a work-from-home scenario? Todd was asking. Dan, do you want to, it's kind of similar to what we were talking about earlier, but do you want to take a stab at that one?
Lots of alcohol.
Nice.
That's it. All right, next question.
Yeah. So I've worked from home for many years, and you know, you'll people will quickly get into habits. You know, the first couple weeks are kind of tough, and I've heard people who start working from home and it's like, oh, they hate it, and what ends up happening is they realize they haven't actually bathed in like 3 weeks, just because they don't have to go anywhere. But what happens is you start to get you know, habits, you know, that you'll start doing every day. I mean, so honestly, my day, I'm a morning person. I start at 5 o'clock in the morning, and I'm usually most productive until about 8 because that's when everyone else that I work with is online. They start bothering me. So I start at 5. About 8:30, I'll take like a 30 to 60-minute break to exercise. I work a little more. Then around 10 o'clock, I have lunch. Remember, I woke up at 5, so 10 o'clock is a legitimate time to have lunch. And then you work a little bit more. Then I take another afternoon break to do something. I mean, I tend to bake a lot of bread now. You know, since I'm home, it's easy to do since I can keep going in the kitchen and doing that stuff. And you work a little more. Then you get ready for dinner. I mean, you end up that you're not going to be working a straight like 9 to 5 day. Your day will actually be longer hour-wise, but you start breaking it up so you just don't get this, you know, mind numbness of just sitting and staring in front of the computer with absolutely no interaction with anybody else. So you start to build these type of, you know, habits, and then working from home is not that big of a deal. It's like, oh, this is kind of nice. I'm assuming other people work from home, like Scott and some of the others on there probably have some other things you do to kind of break up your day or to make it work a little better.
Well, maybe not so much on the break up the day, Dan, but I'll tell you, those who know me know I'm quite the gadget geek. So I'll tell you a couple of things that I have done that really help out. Invest in a nice space for yourself. You know, make sure you have a good chair, multiple monitors, a really good speaker puck, a really good webcam, and then have something in the room that connects you to the outside world. So, you know, I have a monitor off to the side where I can constantly watch the news shows going on between, maybe I don't want to watch them right now, but I can constantly watch them and keep up with what's going on in the outside world. And then probably the biggest thing, if you can do it, a room where you can kind of close the door, because I tell you, I've seen more dogs walk in and kids walk in over the last 2 weeks in some of the meetings that I've been on. But I find myself very productive by having everything laid out in a way that I could never probably lay it out in an office or a cubicle. I'm able to personalize it and make it uniquely mine, and it helps me to become much more productive.
Awesome. Thanks, Scott. All right. Question here. When will EDT be supported through the Cloud Gateway service? Grant was asking. So yeah, Grant, can't really provide specific, you know, timelines here on the call, but soon, very soon, definitely on the roadmap. We know a lot of people are asking for it and want it. Next question here. What are the best practices for XenApp hardware sizing? Do we have a calculator like that takes the number of users, application minimum requirements, and spits out some recs? Yeah, Mustafa, that's right up my alley, you know, because I love scalability. So if you haven't seen that one article I wrote a while back, it's called like the Rule of 5 and 10, and I actually ported that article over to TechZone. I think if you Google Citrix TechZone single server scalability, it'll pop up. But really what we say there is, and again, talking on-prem for a minute here, if most XenApp workloads, or Citrix workloads in general, but XenApp, they're CPU bound. And so I came up with this magic multiplier of 10. So you basically take 10 times the number of physical CPU cores in a box, and that'll give you your estimate, you know, right there. That's, again, the quick and dirty estimate for a medium-ish workload, right? So if you have a 2 by 10 server, let's say, to make the math easy, that's 20 physical cores. 20 times 10 is 200. So you can expect to support about 200 users per physical box. While this question wasn't asked, another popular question I'm getting right now is cloud. Okay, so how does that, you know, Rule of 5 and 10 translate to the cloud? Well, it doesn't really translate, right? Because it's, you know, the host, right, in Azure, AWS, or GCP, it's kind of a black box. But we have, again, another really good scalability, kind of economics of scalability, I want to say, for cloud article on TechZone. And it goes through the different, you know, instance sizes for Azure, I want to say in particular for the one I'm talking about. And it'll say, like, you know, for the D13, you'll get X number of users. And for like the F8 or F16 instance size, it'll support, Y users. So that's one to check out there. But in general, I think going a little bit bigger with some of those F series in Azure are the way to go. So like the F8s and F16s, or the D13s, I think are also pretty popular right now and winning out. It really comes down to, cost per user per hour, right, on the cloud side. But it is different than on-prem, and you can't just use like the rule of 5 and 10. All right. Next question here. Comment about Chuck Norris. Yes, thank you, Todd. I think that was meant for Dan Feller. Let's see. 21. Does Citrix have a plan to include the servers to its cloud solution? No more on-prem and no more Citrix Cloud plus different locations like AWS, Azure. Gilbert was asking. I'm not. Does anyone? Sarah, do you want to maybe take a stab at that question there?
Sure. So if I'm understanding the question correctly, and Gilbert, feel free to chime in if I misinterpret. This is our Citrix Managed Desktop service offering. So the idea behind Citrix Managed Desktops is that Citrix will host the VDA. So there's a predefined list of operating systems that we support. It's deployed in a Citrix Managed Azure subscription and then provided to customers as a service. So in its most basic form, that would not require and it uses Workspace service for authentication and login, right? So in its most basic form, a customer would not own any of the components. There are, I think, tiers to that is how I'd describe it, of where a customer can choose to deploy that desktop into their own Azure subscription and optionally join it to their domain for if they need to access other services that are domain integrated or domain joined, or if they need more control over that image. But there is definitely a service offering that we have in Citrix Cloud that is 100% hosted by Citrix.
Perfect. Thanks, Sarah. All right. Question here. Are there any gotchas with Remote PC and Cloud? Yeah, so Remote PC is really cool. We've been doing a ton of that, right? I think just because, sometimes in a lot of these cases, we needed to stand up entire workforces from home yesterday. And so Remote PC is kind of cool that you can just leverage your existing assets, right, and install a VDA and you're off and running. But yeah, I think in Remote PC is also cool because it works on-prem and with Citrix Cloud. And we've done some of those Remote PC and Cloud deployments over the last couple of weeks. And one of the things I think that's key is rendezvous. So, when we deploy Remote PC on-prem, a lot of times we can just scale out those DDC, those delivery controllers, and just add a couple more, and we're usually good to go. But with cloud, right, it's different architecture. And if you think about that VDA, it's going through those cloud connectors, which can sometimes be a bottleneck, right, before it gets to that gateway service. So with Rendezvous, it's a new policy in 1912, and it's now supported in the gateway. It bypasses that cloud connector. So if you're doing Remote PC in Cloud and you're going big, say you have to do 50,000 users, we recommend turning on that Rendezvous policy. And then that way you don't need to deploy, say 10 or so cloud connectors and scale those out, because if you don't have Rendezvous, all those connections are going through the cloud connector. But with Rendezvous, now we can go around those cloud connectors and kind of scale infinitely, right? So that's
Nick, one of the things you got to remember there is you got to be careful that you don't have a proxy in the middle, and basically the VDA, the Remote PC, has to go 443 outbound to the gateway service URL.
Yep, good point. No proxy support yet on Rendezvous. 443 is one of the considerations, but I think hopefully most folks got that. Yeah, good point, Scott. All right. Last question. Doesn't look like there's any net new questions. So maybe the last one here. What requirements outside of scale up are customers forgetting about with these work from home installs? Sarah, do you want to maybe take a stab at that one?
Sure. So some surprises that I've seen so far that I think maybe caught some customers off guard were things like enabling users for MFA. So they have a whole user base that typically was maybe Office only, never had to access externally, so maybe hadn't been enabled in their MFA setup, hadn't ever had to log in or be issued a token or any of that. So walking their users through that process, but then also getting them registered in that system was kind of a surprise gotcha. that you don't typically think about with your standard Citrix users that have already been accustomed to internal and external access. Other things like printing, you think you have this environment set up, maybe you've configured a remote PC so users can get access to their desktop, but you haven't or don't even know for these users what other peripherals or things like that they need, because again, they aren't your typical quote unquote Citrix users. So there have been some surprise things like that where most folks have been focused on the VDA deployment, the adding of gateways, the adding of storefront servers, the just enabling access, but then how do we actually get users in and what are they doing once they're in there has been kind of a phase 2 of requirements that we're working through.
Yeah, definitely learning a lot every day, which is a good segue. There's no more questions from the audience, so let me cover a few of our favorite kind of key resources, right, related to business continuity, and then we'll wrap it up. So on the screen here, I mentioned David Henshall's messages, right? So there are 2 or 3 of them now. If you hit Citrix blogs, there's a lot of questions today about what is Citrix offering in terms of trials, or what is the BC Assurance program. So check those out. He's got again 2 or 3 articles up there that talk through our commitments during this pandemic and kind of what we're offering. This business continuity microsite, again, you'll get a copy of this deck so you can click on these links here. But we have a new BC microsite we stood up in the last, I want to say, 3 weeks here, and it has links to lots of good kind of business continuity white papers and things to kind of walk your organization through. Another thing I've been highlighting and sharing with customers a lot lately, this technical white paper on disaster recovery and business continuity. We actually authored this about 3 months ago. It's on TechZone if you search for that, and it was just updated like 2 weeks ago. But a really good technical white paper that talks through a lot of the considerations around kind of multi-site, multi-geo, GSLB, things like that. TechZone, if I haven't, besides these tips webinars that I kind of opened with as far as where to stay up to date with stuff, TechZone is definitely should be your best friend. Dan Feller's been, contributing a ton to this site over the last, year or so since we really launched TechZone. But there's a business continuity tech brief. There's the remote PC reference architecture. So how does it, work on-prem and with cloud? Dan just recorded a remote PC tech insight, which is just an 8-minute video showing remote PC. And then our consulting team just authored a remote PC design decisions article last week, and then we updated it just 2 days ago with a lot of the lessons learned from literally the last, week or so of deployments. So TechZone, that's one to bookmark and put in your RSS feeds and keep, make sure you know what's being released there. And then last but not least, so the end user adoption kits. One of the things that's interesting that, makes sense now, but I don't think we saw this coming, was there's a ton of brand new, work from home or remote users. And I think everyone's been reading the articles, in the newspaper about how to stay productive at home. But there's a ton of new Citrix users as well, right? And these are users that don't know what Citrix is. They don't know what Receiver is or Workspace app. And so we have these end user adoption kits that are, publicly available on Citrix. Again, if you just Google it, you'll find them. But what these are is, these are customizable Word docs that you can, put your company logo on and customize, so you can download them and customize. If it's CMD or maybe it's remote PC on-prem, you can customize these for your organization and send them, and create, PDFs or pamphlets for your users, and they can, learn how to basically log into Citrix and, launch a virtual app or desktop. So those are one thing that are really cool, and they're out there publicly available, but I don't think a lot of people know about them. All right, and then last but not least, I just want to highlight a couple of the offerings from our customer success team. So, the 2-day workshop here, if you just want some quick advice from an architect or someone on this panel today, those 2-day workshops are a really great fit. If you want immediate assistance, standing up a work from home solution, this Expand offering there, that's your best bet. And then we also have education, and my favorite's the All Access e-learning subscription. So you can do this at home, in your PJs. And I think why it's really cool is you get access to all the hands-on labs, right? So you can, walk through, how to stand up Citrix Cloud or Remote PC or whatever. And we are offering a discount on a group subscription there, 10% off. And then as a reminder, our customer success management team, right, that Ryan McClure is a part of, we have CSMs and CSEs that our subscription-based customers can leverage to achieve desired business outcomes or get some quick technical help, right, to get them started or get them over the finish line, respectively. And those folks are free, I might add, for our subscription-based customers. So want to make sure to leverage those folks. All right, so again, I think that does it for today. Not seeing any new questions. Again, if we happen to miss your question or didn't have time to answer it live, we'll either follow up with you directly offline, or I'll be publishing a follow-up article, on Citrix blogs in the next week or so, like I said, and we'll include it there. But thanks for tuning in. We know everyone's really busy right now, and we really appreciate your time today. So stay safe out there, and we'll talk with everyone soon. Bye.